we have Darlene Van de Grift next. And she is the executive director of IXO. She's a medical intuitive, founder of A Better Health Massage School, founder of the Soul Union. She's a gifted healer. I can't wait to hear your presentation, Darlene.
Well, Sheila, that was really great. I also wanted to let people know there's two other things that I am teaching with the Professor Ingraham in the New York State for astrosociology for the last 5 years. And that's a real love that I enjoy in helping kids to come to a better understanding of our background and who we are as humans, and the possibilities are endless in their future. And several of them have really stepped forward and have embraced a new concept with realizing that there's been a lot of lies and untruths being told through the generations. So that, and a book that should be coming out hopefully by the end of the year is expanding the universe within. So that explains a lot about what's happening in this time period, the untruths, and also working with the council that we'll be talking a little bit about today. So my title of this presentation is My Mother, the Walk-In, since we're talking about walk-ins. And my mom had a very traumatic, her name's Charlotte, by the way, and she had a very traumatic childhood. Her mother, from the time she was 3 till she was 6, tried to kill her twice. And by the time she was 6, the courts took her away from her mother. So she grew up in that atmosphere. She was raised by her father, and she told me 27 different caretakers took care of her through those years. And, you know, she was considered a street kid. She grew up in South Philly, and that was a very rough neighborhood. And I think even at 9, there was somebody that picked on her younger sister, and she went to his house and broke his nose. So she was very much of a rebel in some ways. And I see her as strong and independent. I've always seen her as having a very strong constitution for who she is and what she wants in her life. And at 13 is when the happening happened with the walk-in. So at 13, her appendix ruptured, and that's very similar, I think, to your son. I listened to that yesterday. He didn't have the malformation, but her appendix ruptured, and back then it was probably in the early 30s, and they didn't operate on her in time. And what she remembers is being wheeled down the hallway in the hospital, and she had a sheet over her head because they assumed that she was dead, and she felt some smaller part roll in. She thought it was a younger girl. She thought it was something that was younger or smaller than her, and it rolled into her body. And when she lifted the sheet off, I think that it really surprised the nurse that was wheeling her down the hallway. But she grew up in a place. My grandfather was Rosicrucianist, so she grew up in a family that accepted the spiritual aspects of life in some way, and that they're spirit beings. She became very psychic. I don't know if that was from the childhood experience or if that was just her. Okay, but those next years of her, so this was at age 13. So those next years were pretty normal for her. She doesn't recollect that there's anything that was different in becoming a walk-in. But in looking back on it and in the work that I do, what I come to recognize that when a soul leaves, right, you have the DNA and you have an original mission that is there. So you have your cellular memory, you have an original mission, and especially if there's a younger child, that mission may need to be, healed. It may need to come to fruition. It may need to come to that place where it's, completed in some way, so that the walk-in can move in a clear body, so to speak. So her mission, as I see it, because of her childhood, was really to be a good mom. I think that was one of her purer thoughts, of being a good mom, as that original soul is coming in to be that. And I really felt that she did that. You know, not all walk-ins come in with changing the dynamics of the person that they come in. Some do, but not all of them have to do that. Some of it's more important because that agreement happens prior to coming in, that potential of, oh, you may have a walk-in at this particular time, so that it's not done to you, it's done with you, and it's done for you in some ways. So that agreement needs to be completed. And so other walk-ins will come in and then everything changes, you know, and that's what we've seen through this conversation and through this conference, is that how many other walk-ins, and then their life changes, you know, pretty quickly. So at the time my mom was 28, she had 2 children, and I was her third one. And she was, because she had 1 kidney, she was born with 1 kidney. The doctors told her that she was forbidden to have another child. Because of that, she kept me secret for 6 months. So she took it out of the realm of them creating a medical emergency for an abortion. What happened with that for me was, I remembered my in utero experience. I remember being probably about 3.5 months in utero, not more than that. And I had bonded with I thought it was my twin, and it's still maybe, there was another being in the uterus with me. And I remember our closeness, our bondedness. I remember we weren't in the same sack, but I remember that there was just like, oh God, I'm not alone. And my first impression of that is I went to, oh God, I'm not alone. And then the next thing I saw is that energy shifted, and it felt like it left. It either was absorbed with her body or it left her body in some way. But the pain level of that isolation, really, as I grew up, I remembered being in the void that Neil talked about. I remember being in there. I remember that, how dark and isolated it was prior to coming here. And so that place of my in utero experience, because what happened with that is that my mother's toxicity kept getting denser and denser, and I couldn't hear her heartbeat. I had no idea where I was, other than I was vibrating at a level of not pain, but it was anxiety. And how do I put this body together? Because in my world, it felt like I needed to put my body together, because there wasn't a book. There wasn't a diagram to tell me how to do this. And it was being awake and aware of what it took to put this all together, you know? As I was probably into my 30s and 40s, I took a decade of working on what happened to me in utero and how it related to almost every part of my life. From being invisible, that I didn't want to be visible. We talk about people in this conference that are, you know, that wanted to stay secret and not bring that out. That was huge for me. You know, it's not just that my mother was a walk-in, or that I remember my in utero experience or any of the other experiences that I had, but it was just not being visible was not safe. Not moving was not safe, because the more that I moved in utero, the more toxic it became. So, you know, I take a look at, and that's what I do with people now, is I go back to these significant parts of their life so that they can understand the value that it has with them. It's like connecting the dots. Sometimes it's in utero, sometimes it's early childhood, sometimes it's past lives, but bringing it all forward, right? Bringing it all forward so I can connect the dots with them, get clarity, and then devise steps, you know, create steps for them in a co-creative process of what can lead them out of that to a more fuller life. So my in utero experience was huge for me. And I attribute that in part for my mother being a walk-in. I don't know if I would have remembered that prior to that, okay? After she had me, she spent 3 months in the hospital, and I went home, and actually I got taken care of by our neighbor who were Navajo. And that was my mother is part Lenape, and they were a Navajo. His name was Luck. And they just took care of me for 3 months. And I think that was another thing of synchronicity of how that, you know, it wasn't a nurse that took care of me. It wasn't even my father that took care of me. It was another couple that took care of me. But her health started to decline. It was following that. She was in and out of the hospitals all the time. And they never really knew what was wrong with her. You know, she had her jawbone replaced. She had something else done. Her gallbladder ruptured at another time. And she, you know, there was all this physical trauma that was going on with her. But when I look back on it, I see that that physical trauma in some way was relating to how the body took on her childhood trauma, right? Because once it gets into the cellular level, it can create disease and illness. And so she was working through that in some way, even though she was in and out of hospitals. And when I was about, I think I was like 8 or 9 years old, we had a medical book that was an old-fashioned medical book, right? And I used to read it because I was like, this was amazing. You know, I wanted to know what was in the hospital. I wanted to know why she kept going in this building that I was never allowed in, right? Because there was no visitation for children. And some synchronistic way, or maybe it was divine guidance, I woke up one morning and I had my jaw out to the side, right? And it got so much attention from her that she went into the medical book and she said to my sister, who's 6 years older, I'm going to go call the doctor because this, you know, that she's got lockjaw. Well, I'm like, lockjaw. Okay. So I look in the medical book, right? And the last word was fatal. And I'm like, fatal. It's fatal. No, it's fatal. I got something really good. I'm going to end up in the hospital. So they did. They sent me in the hospital. I was there for 4 days. But you know, it's like this synchronicity, this bondedness with my mom was really tight at the time because I felt that she really brought me in for a reason, right? And I wanted to know what was going on with her body. So as this event started to happen with her and she got more and more compromised physically, she ended up having a lump underneath her, I think it was her right arm. She ended up having a lump underneath her right arm. And when they took her into the hospital, they put a plastic drainage tube in. And that plastic drainage tube happened to be something that she was allergic to. They didn't know that. I don't even know if she knew that, but she had so much allergy. She had so many allergies to things and they were bizarre allergies, right? So what happened with that is it created a stroke. And then she started to have really bizarre symptoms. So this was probably when I was about 15, maybe, 15, 16. She started to have bizarre symptoms. The Incredible Hulk, you know, that story and that picture of the Incredible Hulk. Well, you would rub my mother's back of her head and she would swell up within 15 seconds. She would break out her zippers. Everything, you know, the clothing would just kind of break apart. And she most of the time would pass out. So that led her to trying to find medically what was going to help her. And she was in and out of hospitals, even more so than when she was younger, but they couldn't find, in fact, they played with her for 6 months. They kept her in the hospital. It was a teaching hospital in Philadelphia. And they brought in all kinds of, you know, doctors and whatever. And what happened with that is that at the end of that, they sent her home. I was 17 at the time, and they sent her home with 6 months to live. She was on oxygen. And one of the things that was really bizarre, not only just the swelling and the passing out, but she would go into comas every 3.5 months. We knew she was going into it. Her eyes would start to get black. She would start, you know, we knew when it was time, and she wouldn't necessarily have a pulse. So they kept telling us that don't assume that she's dead. Just know that because she'd done it for so many times, like 2 years, every 3 months she would do it. Don't assume anything about her. She'll come out of it. And she would remember going to a light. She would remember seeing a lit room, but she never remembered anything else in that. You know, she didn't have any consciousness when she came out of it of, oh, I was visited, or, you know, I saw beings or any of that. And when she was given the 6 months, we all thought that that was it. I mean, I waited all my life to see when she was going to die, because that's what my in utero experience was. Neither one of us were supposed to live. So why wouldn't it happen at some time? And synchronicity had it. There was a friend of a friend that said, well, we know a chiropractor that might help her. We don't know what, but we know a chiropractor. That chiropractor lived 2.5 hours away. And a friend of hers took that on because I was not driving. My sister was working and not driving. And she took her 3 times a week to this chiropractor. This guy was a miracle worker, truthfully. I found out later that he was part of her tribe as the walk-in. There were several of them that were part of her tribe that came to visit me about a week after she passed. And he put her on the Kelly Research Program. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with that, but the Kelly Research Program was something, this was back in the early 70s. And it was, what she was on was 350 pills a day, supplements a day. She took 3 coffee enemas a day. She was devoted to her health. She wanted to live. She wanted to be different than this sick woman that's been there for years, right? And the first year was all she could drink or all she ate was green juices. The second year, all she could put in her stomach was homemade, yogurt. And then the third year, she became a vegetarian. And that gave her 46 more years with me. So, she came out of that. And as I look at that, we heard about and I was familiar with her saying, oh yeah, I'm a walk-in, or a couple of times she had gone to a psychic that first thing they would say is, oh, do you know you're a walk-in? So it was familiar in hearing the word, but I had no idea what that meant, and I really witnessed in her healing process, because what she emerged from that was more of the walk-in. What she became after that is she was fascinated with the human body. She became a massage therapist. She started to do her own work. Her hands became very much healing hands. In fact, people would say to her, your hands are so hot. They're so energetic. And she worked on thousands of people through the next, 20 some years, even more. And she brought them to different places. Like my mom was a big talker. So she would talk while she was working with you, but things would happen. I remember the one woman that came in, she was born with somewhat of a club foot. My mom worked on it for about a year, and it actually was a half a size bigger than the other foot by the time she got done. So there was these specific things that she never really took credit for. It was always like, this is what I do. And I love talking to people, and I love with my hands on. And she became very much of a healer, following her own healing experience. One of the funny stories is I was working at a place called Lit Brothers, which was a department store when I was 21. By that time, she became a massage therapist, and she was starting to develop her own work. And I was making, I think, $4.25 an hour. I was not into any of this, she got well. I was living my own life in some way, I was concerned and worried, but I wasn't like paying that much attention to this. But when she became a massage therapist, she was making $10 an hour. And I was like, oh man, I'm going to make $10 an hour. It wasn't because I wanted to be a healer. It wasn't because I wanted anything other than money sounded good, and I wanted to move out of the house at that point. So, $10 an hour could get me an apartment. When I started on the massage, when I started working with people, I was like, okay, well, I left the massage school and I said, I don't want to work on men. I don't want to work on heavy people. Nobody that has hair on their body. I don't want to do that. And she already had a practice, right? So she was like listening to me. And then she sent me everybody that had anything that I didn't want to do. And within a very short period of time, I fell in love with the human body. It was amazing to me. It was like a piece of clay. You see the paintings behind me. I'm very much of an artist from the age of 12. And these are the beings some of them that I work with. but the body became like this avenue, this intriguing avenue of how to understand it. And when you do this and this, when you massage this, it releases it. And then something's over here. And it just became like a palette for me of how to interpret what was going on with somebody. That led me to so many other modalities, kinesiology, and learning how to, and being part of the imago therapist. So I could learn how to work with couples. And we stayed in business together. My mom and I had a business together. We opened up, that's when I opened up the massage school in that modality. We had it's called a farmhouse. It was outside of Philadelphia area. And, in staying with that and opening up each modality, she was doing the hands-on work. I started with the hands-on work, but I moved more into the emotional component, the past life stuff, the channeling piece. And what happened, I wasn't channeling at the time, but we were doing different workshops at the place. And there was a therapist that came in that did inner child workshop. And the first workshop was really, I got a bug flying around me. And the first workshop that was offered, I wasn't teaching with him at the time. My mother went in, so it was an inner child workshop. It was like, bring something in. Where are you stuck? Let's go back and work with that. Let's go back and see what that's about. Well, they recorded her session. And afterwards, both of them got together and said, I think you should listen to this because this is something that, and don't listen to it with the kids. I had 3 kids. I was a single mom at the time. I had 3 children and I waited till they went to bed and I listened. That experience was her in what she believed to be an abduction. It was in her house. There was 2 grays, that one on one side and one on the other, and they were trying to do something in her carotid artery, and she was terrorized. What it brought up for me, and this is how synchronistic works, this is how, things happen for a reason, is that I'm listening to this, and for years there had been these 3 little beings that would visit me at night. They were all very short. They would all have cloaks on their heads, but I found them to be very comforting. If they weren't by the window, they would be beside the bed, and I'd roll over and I'd see them, and then I'd go back to sleep, and it wasn't a big deal to me. One of those stepped forward and said, it wasn't me, it wasn't us. And I was like, I don't know, I never heard their voice. And I was like, that brought me to a place of, like, the next day I was like, it wasn't me, it wasn't us. Who is that? Who's talking about that? What does that mean? Right? I went to the therapist and he said, let me do a regression with you and see what happens. And out of that, I can't say that it was a regression. It was more of like a hypnosis type thing of just where did that voice come from? And I started bringing forward a being called Eli Wazar. Eli Wazar is this being here. He's he is reptilian. He's from the planet of Maldak. And when he came in, it was a lot about, because I work with timelines, but at that point I wasn't working with timelines, but he brought the first concept in of what a timeline is. And there was a small group of people that I was working with that was from upstate New York. I was in Pennsylvania, and they were told that they were my kin. I didn't understand what that meant at the time, but this, Ellie coming in was really about these people. This was a small group that I had that were learning from, they were in my classes, but he came in to heal that timeline for himself. And in doing so, I channeled him, I brought that energy in through my body. What I can tell you is that in a 5-year period of time, because I did this for about 4 or 5 years, I didn't like the fact of channeling. I didn't like the feeling of being over here and watching. I didn't like the fact that, my body was responding in certain ways. I had my hands that were shaking. They get locked into position. My voice was different. I really didn't like it. And he brought in another, after he finished with the group, he brought in what I call the council of 12, actually, at that point. There was 9. Some of them are here in the background. There was 9 of them, and there was 3 empty seats. And we would work in a facility called the council room, which I still work in. It's a teaching facility. It is, I believe that it is on a craft somewhere. And as a teaching facility, it would bring in multidimensional beings. It would bring in the council. They would sit at this large table. There would be whatever they needed to teach. Sometimes there was humans in the council room. Other times it was full with just other beings that were recognizable to me, and sometimes not. And when Ellie came in and I decided to not do any more channeling of allowing anything through me, I became that mediator. So the multidimensional mediator started at that time, where it was more of how do I connect with them? What's the information that I can bring forward, not only for me, but for my clients? And that was another shift in the dynamics, of my mom was doing her own work. She was doing all the healing work. But for me, and the gift that I think she gave me was bringing me into that healing work, because I don't know if I would ever have found that to the depth that I did. And moving forward with that. So I started channeling, then I quit that. Then I started just becoming this mediator and teaching and starting groups, working with people. When you fast forward that, because we did that for a very long time, we had that for probably 10, 15 years. I think we were in that clinic. I woke up on my 40th birthday, and I was used to working with the council. And they said, "You're moving." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And they're like, "No, you're moving." And I'm like, "No, I'm not." I had a thriving practice. My mom had a practice. We had this 3-story barn that we had finished a few years before. It was a dream, right? And I was like, "No, I'm not moving." So I didn't say anything. And for 3 days, I kept saying to them, "No, I'm not going. That's not what I'm doing." Well, my mother came to me on the 3rd day and said, "We need to move." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So now she's aligned with it. So now we're moving. That was in 95. And we came up to New York. They gave me a choice. I could either go West Virginia or New York. That family that I told you about, that were clients of mine that became friends, they actually became my children's godparents. They were the ones that lived up New York. So it was like, well, that was a no-brainer. I'll go up there. And so I packed the whole family up, the barn, everything that we could take, and we moved up. And that became my next 17 years. My mom, she lived in the back, and there was a building in the back. She lived in a two-bedroom apartment back there, and she still was working. She still worked till she was 80. And she would work with people on the phone. She would tell them what to do. She would, because she could read the body through their conversation. You need to do this, put a book under your back, do whatever. And it was a real gift to have her for that length of time. The next step for me was pretty amazing, because I knew I had a contract with my mother. I knew that she was very religious. So she didn't talk about this with anybody. It was not something that, she wasn't even considering herself as a healer in any way, shape, or form. And she never brought it up, anything about the walk-in or anything, because of the religious aspect of it. So I knew that in some way, where I might be heading with doing the channeling or the multidimensional mediation or whatever, was she would tap into it. I think that's because of the walk-in. She would tap into it. She would sit there sometimes, but she didn't offer a whole lot, and then she would leave. And we never really had that in-depth conversation, which up to this day, I really wish that I had. It was a missed opportunity for me. But I knew that there was a contract that I had with her, that I couldn't overstep that. I feel like she gave me a great gift in bringing me in, first of all, when I wasn't supposed to be here according to the medical profession. So she gave me that. Then we bonded together through her illnesses. Then there was the business that we had together. So there was all these interconnected places that we had, and that we you know, we lived across the road from each other with the clinic, you know, and we were just very connected. And it's not that she was not an easy mother, but we stayed in that bondedness. And we did that for 17 years. Her health started to fail. And the last breath that she took, I was in the hospital. She had just passed. I missed it, by the way. My son was there, but I missed it. But that would have been her choice. I don't think she would have wanted me there. But when she took that last breath, I closed my eyes, because this was the moment in my life that I never wanted to face. And when that happened, it was like a sci-fi movie. I mean, I'm very visual. So in my mediation, there's pictures coming in, they're talking to me, you know, I'm very kinesthetic. I either get it through my body or some way. And so when I closed my eyes, it was like these pillars of sand that were this wall just went into sand, and it blew away. And I was left alone. And I didn't realize how much boundary she had on me. I think part of it was the agreement that we had, that I wasn't going to overstep anything that would be out of her consciousness. But when that blew away, I didn't know who I was. I mean, I was like, that's how connected we were vibrationally, I believe. And I just remember sobbing for hours. And it was a combination of both grief and relief, because I was free. I was finally seeing that in my life right now, whatever that meant, because I didn't know what that meant, that I was now free, and I could do whatever that meant that I was supposed to do. About a week later, she showed up, and she showed up as being a gray, and with her 4 other caretakers that were also gray, that had taken care of her in this lifetime in other ways, right? And they were like, well, I need to go, you know, I need to leave, but I will be back. I just need you to know that my mission here is not quite done yet, but I need to go check in. I need to go do whatever they do when they leave. She stuck around off and on for about a year. And in that time period, you know how they say, you know, when one person dies, there's usually a birth. My daughter always thought that she couldn't get pregnant. And on my way down to see her, was Mother's Day. On the way down to see her, my mother shows up in my car, and she hands me a heart, a red heart, right? And I'm like, oh my goodness, because if there was any conflict, this was like really nice, right? Oh, wow, I'm forgiven for whatever I didn't do, right? So she hands me this heart, and it was made out of construction paper, right? So I'm visually looking at this, and I was like, nice, it's like really nice. And I go to lift it up. This is visual, right? I go to lift it up, and there's a white, smaller one underneath lace. And I was like, oh, it's a me and you know, it's her and I, it's she and I, right? It's, you know, she's the lace, and she's lacy, and I'm the red heart. I get to my daughter's house, and she tells me she's pregnant. She showed me the picture of the baby, right? Because she was now 4 months pregnant, I think it was. And there was not, what I said should not be repeated, but it was something about, oh my, you can't believe this. My mom thought that was funny. I saw her later. She thought that was funny that I didn't get what she was trying to tell me, but she also told me the name of the baby. And when I told my daughter, because she kept it from everybody, they didn't want anybody to know the name of the baby. And so I said to her once, I was like, I don't know if I should say this or not, but grandmom came in and told me the name of your, because we knew it was a boy. And she said, oh yeah, what is it? And I was like, Jacob. And she was like, tell her to stop eavesdropping, because that was his name, and it's still his name. She disappeared for a while. I have some funny stories about when she appeared, and she was a real jokester. But then she's been gone. You know, just this last week, she actually came in because there was something going on when I was visiting with the grandkids. But that energy, and I believe that walk-ins, what she did tell me about walk-ins, because I had asked her about that, is that it's not random. One, you have to have an agreement, you have to have an alignment. There's needs to be some kind of resonance with the being that walks in, and some kind of agreement prior to here. Whether that you stay in choice with that or not, that will be up to the individual. So, you know, if you have a near-death experience and you really want to stay, they're not going to say, oh, you have to leave. It's going to be your choice that you want to stay. But there is an opportunity of you knowing that somebody else could come in and finish your life in some way if it becomes too difficult. You know, you're too compromised. But she told me that they're also trained. So walk-ins are trained to be a walk-in. They're not just anybody that can go and do that. And I found that intriguing. My husband at one point, I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, was not well. He was in the hospital. He was having high blood pressure. And as I'm coming home, because I drove home, as I'm coming home, she shows up. And she said, we were talking about walk-ins. And she said, well, would you like me to be a walk-in if he dies? And I was like, no, you know, that was not okay. And that's what I mean by she's can be quite a jokester. So that brings me to the fact of looking at this consciousness that we are in this time period. The council that I work with, there's a council of 28. So they started to come in at that time. They started to give me information about their timeline. So you see some of them back here. They're light beings now. But why they came in was for me to understand their history, how they related sometimes to me, but other times they were, you know, how they connected together. Some of them are Anunnaki, they're in an Anunnaki body. But they wanted us to see, they wanted me to teach people about they're not different than us, you know, in their evolutionary states. They didn't just show up as a light body. You know, they had to go through their own evolution, and they are like us. They have families, they had feelings, they have understandings, they have, you know, they had to learn too. So in their showing up, it was really about me being integrated with them. It was really about me being part of, not only in my own work of what needed to be cleared with me, with timelines of where I was held accountable. How was I going to be responsible for things that I have done in the past? You know, that was all part of the experience of integration. And what they come in for is to clear those timelines, because then it opens up space for them, because they're part of us in some way. You can call on the multidimensional parts of yourself, and they can come in to have an access to you, so that they can help you, so that whether that's with health conditions or that's with financial conditions or whatever it is that's aligned for your growth and your potential, they're very much here to assist, you know, especially in this time period. You know, the veil is diminished, if not greatly down. And so this time period, even though it's very chaotic, it's time for us to clear up our karma, because karma is diminishing. Karma was not supposed to be in this place for any length of time. It was a balancing thing, but it got out of control. And so now we're repeating over and over and over again. And if that template of the karma is taken from around the planet, then we are just living in the moment. Then we don't have to choose to come back because we're told to come back. We can choose to come back because we want to. So they're here to release that karmic influence. They're here to align themselves with us so that we understand them, so that we can clear our own timelines and bring in a better future. I think that's about it. So we've all been waiting for this time. The more I'm listening to the people, you know, that you've invited in these last few days, it's we're all waiting for this time, but and it's here, and it may not look, you know, it may not look like what we thought it was going to look like, but things are bubbling and things are breaking loose and things are falling away, and that's exciting in some way. And if we can hold on to the excitement and the reality of what we all can create, and we let go of what's hindering us and the divisiveness, all the division that we're seeing. Because if you look for it in how I work, when I look at the division that we're seeing right now globally, right, it's timelines coming up. They're bubbling up to be worked on. What side are, where are you in your heart and mind? Where are you with what do you want to create? It's not about the Republicans or the Democrats or the this or the that, or it's about where do you stand? Where is your authority? And I think that's what multidimensionals are offering us, is to come back to that authority of who we are. What do we want to create? Not only within ourselves, but, with them. This is the time to do it. This is the time to shed our old stuff and bring something in that can really be useful to humanity.
Right. So if someone wants to get a hold of you and have a session, I know that you provide a lot of different sessions. I've worked with you before. My husband's worked, my daughter. It's been wonderful. Can you share with people how they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, my
And
website. Sure. And tell them what?
and talk about the different sessions that you offer.
They all actually get woven together. So the sessions that I do, I go from medical intuitive. If that's what you're interested in, you can find me on soulunion.com. And they get woven together. So what I usually tell people is record, because there's so much information that you can only hold so much and take notes. Because I'm working with these beings at the same time, plus your guidance system, plus what your body's telling me, plus whatever other information that comes in. So there's a reading that can be done on your physical level of what's going on, tracking whatever issues you may have. What is the reality of that? What are the steps forward, whether that's nutritional or could be emotional that's stuck in there, could be a past life that's stuck in there. Bringing that forward, and then weaving a bigger story of where, what's important for this particular person to move forward in their life. How do they, and sometimes that's business, how do I create a business for myself? Or I'm thinking that, this is something that I came in with, but I just can't get there. Well, what needs to be cleared so that you have a deeper understanding of yourself, so you can connect the dots, right? So you can lead a fuller future. So they can reach me on soulunion.com. The other places I do Sunday Sage, which is cosmic consciousness, and it's an hour and a half. It's a third Sunday of the month. That is written in the Soul Union too. I forget what's on the top of that to find that, but it might be under events or something, but that's there. It's a third Sunday of the month. It's an hour and a half. It's $20. And what that is we work in the council room. So the council room is that teaching facility. We do a meditation that's called 246 that was given to me by one of the beings, which is actually flushing and letting go of whatever you're holding on to as you're heading up to the council room. And in that council room, people can ask questions. They're more global questions. They're more cosmic questions. They're not personal, physical questions as much. And I've been doing this for about 3.5 years.
Beautiful. Now, does the council have, any words of wisdom that they have been sharing with you about the paradigm shift that's coming up that we're all talking about?
Well, the paradigm shift is here.
Yes.
It's not coming. That's the magical piece of it, is that, we woke up one day and wow, we're in it.
Yeah.
We've been told that it was coming for decades, right? But now we're in it. But what are we going to do with it? So for them, there's so many modalities out there now that when I started back in the mid 70s, the early 80s, there was very little of modalities. But through kinesiology, through, Reiki, all of that, it's just exploded in so many avenues that people can have to raise their vibration. It's not just working with multidimensionals. If you're in the mindset, the heart and mindset to increase your vibration or get well or understand something, it's all whatever modalities, EFT, any of those will have a significant effect on changing your vibration, bringing it up to a level that is more conducive to bringing in maybe more parts of yourself. So they are excited about this time period. They would also say that, you know, things need to fall apart in order to come together. So the fear level that many people may have at this time period, it can be honored by just saying, by breathing through it and just saying, I'm going to not follow that timeline that we've been in for 1,000 years. I'm not going down that, even though it looks like it has huge, deep roots, right? I'm not going that way. I'm choosing to go to this timeline where there's masters and teachers, where there's multidimensional beings, where there's people like that's in this conference, where there's just more good-hearted people that want to make a change. I don't want to be in the fear level and the anger and the resentment. I don't want to be there. I'm coming over here. It's a constant for some people. It's a daily choice. When you watch TV, where do you want to be aligned? Do you want to be aligned with what's going on, or do you want to take a breath in and say, no, I choose to be over here? That over here is where we can co-create. And there's so much more happening on this planet that's not in the mainstream, that if you start to do some digging, you'll just find out that there's amazing people that are doing wonderful things, you know, but we have to search for it because it's not something that's given to us. Why? That's that old timeline, right? So it's moving into the new one that says, here we are, we can do something. We're here to co-create with you, whether that's walk-ins, whether that's channelers, however we're bringing it forward without the fear.
Yeah. Beautiful. Now, do you have any final words of wisdom or anything that you'd like to share with us?
Well, they are, for me, this is an emotional time. And what I can tell you in the integration process, because walk-ins don't look like it's an integration process, right? Because one leaves and one comes in, or maybe there's a blending, or maybe there's, you know, like you said, there's what the cords or the braiding, right? So it doesn't look like there's much integration, but what they're saying is when they come in to work with us, each individually, collectively, or whatever, that's like a conscious walk-in. That's like, we are in agreement with here. I am bringing you in because I know about you, because I resonate with you, because you're part of me, you know, and you bring that in. It's a conscious walk-in, which I believe that more and more is going to happen with that. There's going to be many more people that are experiencing some form of that. And the IXO is bringing in that, the IXO community is bringing in the experiencers that have this, you know, whether they're walk-ins or they're channelers, or they've just had an experience with it, with an ET or a multidimensional, bringing them together so that it becomes a huge vortex of what people can understand. And it's a wealth of knowledge where they can tap into that. They're not isolated. You know, this time period is not about being isolated.
Right. I love all the ETs surrounding you there. Who did all that art?
That's my paintings. That's
your paintings. Wow.
Yeah.
Are they seen? You have a website for them somewhere?
Yeah. So they're under my, on the Soul Union.
Okay.
And what happened with that is about 5 years ago, when they started to come in, they said, I want you to paint a painting that's 3 feet by 3 feet. And I put them up in a circle, and there was the Merkaba in the middle, and, you know, and that was fine. But 3.5 years ago, they said, if you're going to take this out, we each want a portrait.
Wow.
So
well, yeah, no, I was just wondering, who are the ones with the long skulls, which right behind you? Yeah, who are those beings?
they're called the Gemini brothers, but they're also part of the Great Whites, the tall white.
Are these races you've actually interacted with?
Yes.
Oh, wow. So do they show up for their portraits, or is it in
Yes, they did.
They sit for their portraits. Okay.
They did. And they had a story behind each one, which is, you know, at some point it's going to be part of a book. of how they interact and how they relate to each other and who came first and all that.
Wow, that will be a great book. Thank you. This is the kind of document we need. So as more people have experiences, they could put it into a context.
Yeah, their reasoning behind who they have been, because now they're all light bodies, right?
Mhm.
But they needed us to understand who they were. And Ellie, when he came in, he's a reptilian, right?
Mhm.
Then she's one of my favorite is Sari, and she's gray. And she's my behavior analyst, so she helps me with a lot of people and learn about people's
Wow.
behavior, why they do what they do. And then there's a few Anunnaki, but they come in as defectors, as I see them, because they have left what they were not designed to be, but what was put on them.
Are you channeling their messages sometimes, or their?
Well, when I work in the council room, it's who shows up at the time. And if there's a question, or sometimes they're just teaching about what's happening in the moment or what they feel that the audience needs to know. I don't channel, I mediate with them.
Right.
So, they'll tell me something and then I'll explain what's
Right.
going on and what's happening in the council room. And a lot of times the group itself not only asks questions, but they work. They clear timelines for themselves.